Hello and welcome to this instruction course called the 360-degree resident. So this session is special for two reasons. From the audience perspective, this is first of its kind. So this is one standalone course which will give all the elements of excellence to be a well-rounded resident. And for us, the speakers, this is again more special to us because we are representing Aravind Eye Care System, the institute which gave us the experience and expertise to perform and to talk in this instruction course. I'm very proud of my team. We have young stalwarts in their respective domains. So to begin with, the very first speaker, Dr. Harini Krishna. She is a university gold medalist from Aravind Madurai, and she was my junior in residency. And I can vouch for her impeccable academic record. And she's going to guide the residents on how to ace the exams as the gold yielding resident. So over to you, Harini.
Thank you, sir. Are my slides visible?
Yes.
Hello, everyone. I wish you all a very good morning. I'm Dr. Harini Krishna, and my topic today would be how to prepare for examinations. So starting with approaching an examination, I think the most important thing you need is motivation and a positive attitude towards exam. You just need to believe that you can do it, and I'm sure you can do it. If you're eyeing a gold medal or if you want to come up with distinctions or honors, you just need to believe it first that you can do it. But I always feel that performance in exams does not just depend upon studying only in the third year or just before the exams. It has to start right from the beginning, right from the first year and second year. But how do we do it? In the first year, the most important thing would be going to the clinic and seeing patients, seeing as many patients as possible. It could be just torchlight or it could be slit lamp examination. That doesn't matter. But coming back home and then studying about the cases seen in the OPD is very, very important. You can study in Payman or Kansky or any book of your choice, but making it a habit to study for 1 hour every day about the cases you just saw in the OPD is more than enough. It will give you a lot of confidence and knowledge. I truly believe that the eyes see only what the mind knows. So once you start studying regularly every day for 1 hour, you feel more confident to go to the OPD and you would cover a lot of topics too. We all know that in post-graduation, nothing would be spoon-fed. So you should always have a good rapport and relationship with the seniors. And you can learn a lot of things from seniors only and not directly from professors. It's very difficult. So you need to keep asking them a lot of doubts and clear all your doubts right from the first itself, because you never want to continue a post-graduation with some wrong ideas or wrong concepts in your mind. So always clear off your doubts right in the beginning. And by the middle or the end of the first year, you must be able to select your main textbook. As I already mentioned, it could be Kansky, it could be Payman or AO. That is your choice. But you must be able to select your base textbook. You can always study from reference standard textbooks, like for Ryan's from Retina or Shields for glaucoma, and add stuff from that into your main textbook. Never shy from reading standard textbook. You can always refer more than one textbook for every specialty, but then you need to combine it with your main textbook. I always emphasize on taking notes, because in post-graduation, it doesn't depend upon one book. You need to study in 2 or 3 books. So you need to compile them into one notes. So these were my notes. I had separate notes for every specialty. These were my retina notes. And the first page of every notes used to contain all the contents divided based on paper 1, paper 2 to paper 4. And I used to write notes. And later on, if I need to add points, I used to add them with stick notes. So maintaining separate notes for every specialty will make it extremely easy for you during your revision for exams, and you can also use it in your future for teaching your juniors and other purposes too. So when coming to studying from articles, keeping the knowledge part apart, only from an exam point of view, only for the topics which I was not able to find adequate in standard textbooks, or I couldn't comprehend easily, only for those topics I studied from articles, and mainly from DOS articles and other articles from online sources and good journals. So we need to learn to balance study, work, and personal life, because as we enter into second year, things get more difficult. We have to manage OPD, theater, ward, and personal work too. But as I already mentioned, if you had already made it a habit to study 1 hour per day, it becomes kind of a routine, and you really can't stop yourself from studying every day. So a 1 hour per day is more than enough to make you feel confident. Also, I believe that if at all you have free Sundays, a half of the Sunday can be used for personal work, and the rest half of the Sunday can be used to finish your thesis work or finishing off topics which you have left over, or any interesting topics too. Also, make use of the specialty postings. For instance, if you have a specialty posting of retina for 1 month, finish off all the retina important topics in that 1 month itself. Similarly for other specialties. So by the time you have finished your specialty postings, you would have completed a large chunk of exam topics too, and you can easily be confidently aware of all the topics too. So once you enter into your third year, you're being called EGPG, which is very, very dreadful, exam going postgraduate. But I think if you had planned nicely right from the first year and you have studied consistently, it's just a cakewalk. The first thing I would emphasize once you get into third year is creating a question bank. I believe you should always prepare your own question bank. Don't just download it from online sources. You can get the question papers and write down the questions on your own, dividing it into specialities and according to paper 1 to paper 4. Because when you write your question bank yourself, you actually understand the weightage of the questions asked and the topics you need to concentrate, and you understand the magnitude of the problem in front of you. So always prepare your own question bank. Also, start increasing your study hours. If it was 1 hour per day, then start increasing it by 2 hours or 2.5 hours. See, as I already mentioned, if you had been following that 1 hour per day, then it will just be a very smooth transition, and you can just easily change to 2 to 2.5 hours per day. Side by side, we'll have to start preparing for case presentation as well. As you're preparing for theory, study the particular topic, the pertaining topics in FAQs in ophthalmology or ophthalmology clinics, and have a handwritten case format for all the clinical cases which could be asked in the exams. So as we enter into the second part of third year, things get very stressful. You feel a little burdened. So I always recommend you to go for group studies, because when you're in a group, you feel less stressed, you feel happy. And when you're around with friends and things are discussed, I feel you can remember them better when it is discussed in a group. So if you have like-minded people around you, always go in for group studies. And never shy to ask for help. There are a lot of nice people around us. You can always ask your senior residents, your juniors, to help you during exams, to help you they can teach you nice topics, and you can also remember them better. And one more important thing is, if you are good in any subject, always feel free to teach others, because by teaching others, you remember twice the better and you understand the subject twice the better. So never ever tell no to teaching others. So coming to model tests, I think it's very, very important, because for a lot of us, it would have been 3 to 4 years since we had given the university exam. So writing a 2 or 3 model tests right before the exam would really help in improving your performance. Personally, I gave 15 model tests right before my exam, and I think it helped me a lot in doing my exams really well. So coming to study holidays, if planned nicely right from the first year, study holidays can be used only for revision. So we can just maintain a timetable and revise according to the timetable, and always keep the volatile topics which you tend to forget at the end. So coming to the exams, you have theory and practicals. In theory, you may know a lot of stuff, but that doesn't matter. What you're going to show to the examiner, that's the only thing that matters in the exam. So you plan your answer and plan the headings nicely, or legible handwriting and crisp answers is very, very important. Always highlight the important points and try to use a lot of colors, which will make the answer sheet look quite presentable. When it comes to diagrams, it's extremely important in university exams. You need to make large diagrams, colorful diagrams, and make it nice and not cramp into the written space. Always leave some space around the diagrams, so it will make your answer sheet look nice. So coming to practicals and Viva, I always believe that if you had been sincere to OPD, if you have been sincere in seeing patients, you will have all the confidence to come into the practical hall. Always be loud and clear in what you're speaking to the examiner, and answer to the point. Never leave any loose talk or beat around the bush, because that will only put you into more trouble. And never shy from telling that you don't know to the examiner. It's always okay to tell that you don't know, rather than giving an extremely absurd answer. And never ever argue with the examiner, because the examiner is always right. Be humble and nice when you speak to the examiner. So coming to the end, so what makes the difference between a gold medalist and the rest? I think there are people who are much more smarter and intelligent and well-read than the gold medalists. But what matters is what you present at that point of time and the presence of mind you have. So even little you know, if you present in a nice manner, I think that makes a difference. And hard work would betray none. And early worm always gets the worm. So there is always a difference between those who study at the end and those who study right from the first. So hard work right from the beginning will help you do wonders in exams. So somehow in my mind, at the back of my mind, always the medal was there right from the first day of my post graduation, and I was somehow able to make it. And if I can, I think anyone can. So all the best and thank you.
Thanks a lot, Harini. That was an excellent talk. You have condensed your 3 years of experience into an 8-minute talk, which is very much commendable. So the key message is going to be the exam preparation for a residency starts from day one. So if there are any questions to Harini from our fellow speakers. I have a question, Harini. I see many residents, after finishing their DO, they join the secondary DNB in another institute. They feel incredible difficulty in coping up with the subject. For example, one of my residents who is doing her secondary DNB, she did her DO in not a very good institute. So the DNB she's finding very overwhelming. So how to go about it, considering you are a secondary resident now?
So basically, I had prepared nicely in my DO. So I just used it as a base for my DNB. So if at all they are not prepared nicely in DO, I think it's the same thing you follow. It's the same 2 years, right? So DO is also 2 years, DNB is also 2 years. So right from the beginning, if we start preparing methodologically and consistently, I think it's not going to be very difficult. And I also, first I used to believe that the DNB questions are quite different from diploma. I think I just assumed that they are more difficult, but it's just the same subject, sir. So I think there's nothing to be scared about it, and we just need to prepare right the way we prepare like a diploma, and a little more sincerely. I think that's what it needs.
Great. So even though the question patterns might differ a bit, I think the methodology of learning still is the same.
Yes, the subject is same. So I think we need to study the same way.
Right.
One small question to Harini.
Yes, yeah.
Like everyone would be like, everyone wants to know how much revisions you gave, like 2 revisions, 3 revisions, like everyone counts. I have revised only once, I have revised only twice. That's what I counted. So what's your experience? Like how many times you revised a topic? That what also matters, I think.
I gave 3 revisions, sir. By the end, I think probably maybe even it could be 3 or 4, close to 3.
Okay, great. Okay, should I share my screen?
Yes, sir, please. Yeah, yes. So next we have, the next speaker needs no introduction. He is a prodigy in publications, Dr. Bharat, who is a coronary consultant at Aravind Hospital, Pondicherry. He is going to give us valuable insights into how to publish and flourish as a postgraduate. So over to you, sir.
Thank you. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
So first of all, I would like to thank All India Ophthalmic Society for conducting this excellent virtual conference and giving a young ophthalmologist like us an opportunity to share our experience on like how to make a 360-degree resident. Like I'm Dr. Bharat Gundani from Aravind Eye Care System, Pondicherry. I'm a junior consultant in cornea department. I'll be discussing and sharing my thoughts on scholarly resident, how to research and publish. I have no financial disclosures. So coming to what is actually a scholarly resident, like in our Indian scenario, when a resident enter into post graduation, suddenly he's expected to write down papers, do some good research work, publish important papers. Besides that, write exams and pass them with brilliant flying colors, as discussed by Harini. But is it that easy compared to Western scenario where these students already have learned all these tricks and tips in their undergrad school? Somehow we are not taught like this in our undergrad school. So we find it very difficult to adjust with this. And we find it like, oh, this is something new. We don't know, we have never done it. So that's why it takes time to adjust to these things. But I will give you my thoughts of a step ladder approach, how to go about publishing, like what all can we do and how to get good outcomes in a small time, what I believe. So I'll be discussing a few important points under these headings, like research interest, knowing how you should knowing your subject well, following your mentors, reading interesting papers, writing down research questions, documenting a particular patient. Excel in statistics is another kind of a language for us. developing a habit of writing so that we can publish, English language and reference management softwares available, what are the journals to be targeted, and what groundwork should be done before submitting a particular work. So coming to research interest, first and foremost about publishing is developing a keen interest in research. Without interest, we can't excel. So how to develop that interest? We should follow like-minded people, like those who have already published, those who are already in that stream, those who have reviewed good papers, those who can guide you. So once you are in following these people, you are on right track, I guess. I would suggest in your residency or in your fellowship, start with a small thing, image or a photo essay or a case report, just to give you a kickstart. If you do that, suppose if you write an original paper, you spend 2-3 months and you'll end up not publishing it, then you'll feel dejected, you feel demotivated. So you stop doing it. So I would suggest smart with a small things, then build upon it. A name in the journal is the biggest motivating factor, I guess. When I published my first paper, I never thought I can publish. But once I saw it, it became an infectious process. Like, oh no, I want to do it now. I want to do it. There are various research platforms available like ResearchGate, Publons. A lot of important websites are there, which you can make a small account there and you can follow them. They give you get a lot of input from different people. You tend to read a lot of paper. Just to give you an example, I recently wrote 2-3 months back this article, Clinician. This article gives a detailed insight on these 20 research. I have listed 20 research platforms there. If anyone interested can go through this. Another thing is knowing your subject well. The previous speaker, Harini, highlighted it very well. So majority of us forget that. Like we think like exams we'll give and just we'll pass off. But the important thing is knowing your subject in detail. Once you know the small things in detail, then only you can pick up rare things. Then only you can find out rare findings. The aim of any student, I must suggest, is quest for knowledge rather than just passing the exams. If you aim for quest, if you have a quest for knowledge, that is very helpful in long term. Then you start enjoying your subject. Then you want to know more about the topic. Then this will give you an edge over others, I guess. I must suggest appear and clear these exams. This will sound slightly different. Why we want to just we have got our degree, but no, write these exams, FICO, ICO, MRCS, FRCS. This will help you to build and improve your acumen, I must say. This will help you to open up different thoughts. This will give you insight about a particular topic. How can this topic be dealt? And if you develop this, you are ahead of other people, I guess. Always ask questions. Doubts must arise. You should always think, oh no, this is normal, this can happen. Oh no, I want to know more about it. If this habit should be developed, if this habit developed during your residency, that becomes a habit later on and you come out with flying colors, I guess. Following your mentors, I think play a huge role initially for guiding and shaping your career, because once we come as a juvenile resident, we don't know anything about thesis, writing a paper, research. So they are the best reviewers, I guess, because suppose you are writing a paper and submitting, and if your mentor reviews it critically, gives you important comments and you change it, your paper has been already criticized well. So there is a huge probability that it will get through. So I think they have a huge role to play. They have loads of experience. They have published hundreds of articles. They must have reviewed. They have given so many talks and all. So they are the best people who have lots of experience. You have to follow them. You should take guidance from them. Another important thing, when an article comes with a revision or a rebuttal, they can tell you how to convince the reviewer how to write this paper again. So then it becomes a huge opportunity for you to publish. And they should pass the baton to the coming generation. This should be the aim of a student. How should the mentee-mentor relationship should be followed, which is lacking slightly in us, but this should be inculcated. Another important thing, reading interesting papers. Just give you an example of this paper. We were discussing in our canteen, oh, we are having a lot of headache by wearing respirators. So I thought, why? Like, what is the theory behind it? What is the pathology behind it? I just went on reviewing it. I designed my research question. Like you can see, headache associated face mark during COVID-19 pandemic. Are we seeing epidemic? A lot of people are complaining, and this turned out into a paper. Another important paper we published, publication trends of COVID-19. I thought we can We can compare these two articles in Indian Journal, and luckily our thought process was converted into huge articles. So small thing, these kind of things or these kind of discussion provoke your thoughts. You should go about thinking about what happens, what can we do. Learn to critique a paper. When you read a paper, this is art which is learned over time. Again, multiple times reading the same thing will help you to get out of new questions, and these questions are your research paper. I think interesting articles, you must be reading interesting articles, then these articles will inspire you to do similar kind of work. For example, a simple image I saw in first year, sutural with blue dot cat, right? I never thought it will get published, but we published in Japan because we thought it's something different. No, everybody is not seeing it maybe, and luckily we got through. So reading interesting articles, seeing interesting images will inspire you to do work. And I must say, this is a cycle of thought, concept, and action. First, you have to think, then develop a concept over it. Once you are done over it, put it into a paper. Action. This action is an important word. You have to put it in, you have to act. If you don't act, this will remain a thought. Coming to research questions, a good research question, I must say, is the foundation of your paper. You should have a strong intuition to develop that question, a research question. You should think, what can we do for this? What can we do this? We should be well versed with the literature. We should do a thorough literature review, read multiple papers. If we do that, then we start thinking in different channels. When we don't find a road, we'll think what other road can go off. Reviewing articles, special issues, debated topics will always help you to formulate a good research question. Coming to documenting, examining a case, I must say, is not enough. Examining in detail is very much important. Pinpointing small findings, this will be very important. Just prime requirement before publishing is perfect documentation. When you have documented the clinical finding, images, investigations, you have taken the consent properly, then only it will fit into a particular format. Suppose we don't have any of this, suppose one thing is missing, we can't put it in an image, we can't put it in a case report. So before documenting, we should not decide which article is this or what it fits in. After documentation, we should decide like it will fit in a case report or clinical finding. Sometimes images are missing, sometimes investigations are missing. So this is very important. We should, and this can be inculcated in first and second year by examining multiple patients. Coming to Excel and statistics, this is another language which will help you to understand paper well. Rules of writing in Excel can be learned with the help of mentors, or there are a lot of YouTube videos available where you can go and search and you can learn easily, I guess. The basics of statistics must be known to comprehend things better, like what is a categorical variable, what is a continuous variable, what is chi-square test, what is t-test. These are taught at undergrad level. We can follow this. There are a lot of online courses available, like BMG offers one course for statistics. It's slightly costly, but if someone is interested, can follow that. UG level statistics, I think, is enough for basics, but if you want to go beyond a limit, then you can go about reading it in detail. I must say, set daily goals about writing. Don't write a whole paper in a day or two. This will irritate you. This will burden you, I guess. Write small paragraphs daily. Set a target. I'll be finishing. Don't copy. I must say, when you're writing an article, don't copy. Just read it, think about it, and put it, rephrase that sentence or rephrase that article and put it in your own words. That is the best way of doing it. Set a target, follow it. Like, I'll write this paper in 10 days. I'll write this in 15 days. If you follow that, you're through. Coming to English language and softwares, like there are a lot of softwares available online for checking English, grammar, alignment, spellings. Like Grammarly is one such which will help. And there are reference management software like Mendeley, Zotero, EndNote. If you follow, these can be learned through YouTube videos, and if you follow them, your manuscript looks slightly different from others, I guess. Targeting
wrap up in next 30 seconds.
Yes, ma'am. Targeting a journal is important, like what is a manuscript quality, content, research question, article type, what specialty you are aiming, impact factor, acceptance rate of that journal, international, national, or journal. So if you have to win, you have to do your groundwork correctly. Writing down papers quickly is one important thing. Following author instructions, images, table, title page, cover letter, figure legend, all these must be done. And we should not forget publication ethic. We should not do plagiarism. We should not copy images. We should have, if you have any conflict of interest, we should disclose it. So just sharing my experience since Feb 27, 2020, in 1.5 years, you can achieve this, I guess. So before ending, I must say intelligence and capability are not enough. There must be a joy of doing something beautiful. Thank you, one and all.
Thanks a lot, sir. It was an excellent talk. It's not easy to condense all these information within an 8-minute talk. You require even a day to get more from sir. So the message is keep your curiosity intact and the thinking hat on. Keep on asking questions, and that is the way to go to flourish in publications. So next we have, I think if Shakti is on.
Yes, Pranesh.
Perfect. So we come to one of the most awaited part of this course. Dr. Shakti Vanar is a Cornea Fellow from Aravind Coimbatore, and he is passionate about fitness and health. He will talk on a very important yet an underrated topic for all of us, not just a resident, every one of us. How to be a robust, how to be a fit and healthy resident. So over to you, Shakti.
Thank you, Pranesh. Should I share my screen?
Yes, please.
Okay. Okay, am I audible?
Yes, you're audible. Slides are visible.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so good morning, everyone. I am Dr. Shakti, and today I'll be sharing a few ways to how to stay healthy and fit during your residency, which will help you immensely in your professional and personal growth. Well, we will be covering, just 1 minute. Yeah, we will be covering 4 crucial aspects, which I want you to focus on, which will be posture, physical fitness, and mental health. The challenges leading to a constant energy deficit state, not just during your residency, but during your pursuit, will be occupational ailments involving neck pain, back soreness, shoulder pain, lack of self-care and exercise, unhealthy diet, mental causing stress, anger, frustration, anxiety, and professional and personal complacency. Let us look at work-related musculoskeletal disorders, the most common occupational injuries and illness among ophthalmologists. The risk factors are long working hours, operating on slit lamp, examining patients on slit lamp, operating on microscope, awkward posture, repetitive movements like typing, clicking on mouse, writing with hands, etc., etc. Now, studies have shown that these ailments, the prevalence of these ailments ranges from 46 to 94% among ophthalmologists, and 7% of them has to give up surgery at some point of their career, which is quite high. And 15% of the ophthalmologists actually limit their work as well because of these problems. So what can we do? Now let us look at the pictures. What are the good posture and bad posture? All the images on the left side are showing very bad posture. So in first picture, the surgeon is sitting away from the back and leaning into the microscope, which is not good. Ideally, a surgeon's back and neck should be in a neutral position, just like just like it is shown in the images. While operating on microscope, while working on desk, or while examining a patient. Now let's move to the physical fitness. Now exercise is vital because it not only strengthens our body, but also boosts our energy, mood, self-confidence, and added benefit is improved concentration and focus. We tend to make a lot of excuses, which are actually pseudo challenges, like they are not even actual real challenges. Like we don't have much energy, we don't have much time, no motivation, no self-worth, social stigmas, like okay, if I will exercise now and then I will stop it, that I might get fat and everything, etc. Because of these problems, we tend to not to focus on our fitness, but everything can be managed with positive mindset and attitude. So where should we start? Keep in mind that any habit takes 3 weeks to form. You can start slow with just 15 to 30 minutes of running, yoga per day, or stretching exercise, which we can do like 4 to 5 days a week. After that, we can start start setting a routine where we actually work even more strenuous. We can join gym, sports, dance for a short period, and decide our and it will be possible if we are able to, if we keep on doing this, we might be able to reach our physical goals and healthy weight. Coming to nutrition, the most important factor in your fitness journey. Now, eating healthy takes a lot of discipline. The first step is to start going into the kitchen or getting a hot plate. I know most of the residents does not have access to kitchen. So we can start by just getting one hot plate and making some small meals, which can help us to increase our energy. And start after that, once we start doing that, and once we keep doing that, then we can start prepping our meals, educate ourselves for healthy diet habits. Avoiding sugar, packaged food, regulating caffeine is very important because sugar is completely non-essential ingredient for our body. And doing this 3-4 weeks per day, that will also help. Drinking water 3-4 liters per day is very important. If our work is hectic, then we sometimes tend to ignore that. A balanced meal on your plate should somehow look like this: 50% veggies and fruits, 25% of carbs, and 25% of protein. Also focus on hitting your calorie goals, which is for a male would be 2400 calories, and for female it would be 2300 calories. There are myriad advanced diets which we have now discovered. Now, keep in mind that any diet, keto, vegan, paleo, carnivore, some of the popular diets, each of which have their own advantages, but you can make a tailor-made diet plan suited to your lifestyle and palate. This is one more aspect where we tend to ignore. Now, there are many supplements that is very essential for human body and which we have to take because these are very deficient in our usual diet. The most common is B complex and vitamin D. Last but not the least, mental health is one of the most neglected but most crucial factor. So what are the stressors during residency? Heavy workload, no off days, academic pressure, toxic work environment. Usually we lack this stress management skills to handle it. This leads to psychological problems such as depression, anxiety, substance abuse, burnout, and it keeps on increasing. There are researches about it. There are few ways to manage your stress and take care of your mental health, which are, first of all, we have to limit our screen time. Right now, it's increasing like anything, but that will help us, and that will help us to go on go further in our career. Then we can focus on our workout, eat diet habits, and meditation. Meditation is very important. Also take some time to enjoy a hobby and learn a new skill. Seeking help for mental health and issues is sadly stigmatized in our country, but seeking timely professional help is vital. In a nutshell, small steps such as staying active, taking the stairs and not using lift, drinking enough water, avoiding addiction, reducing screen time, and getting adequate sleep, at least 7 to 8 hours sleep, will go a long way. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Shakti. It was an excellent talk. Ophthalmologists are the worst affected with the workplace injuries, and hope Shakti's advice would give our residents to have a long, prosperous career. So please take care of yourselves, and nothing matters more than your physical and mental health. I think one key message what Shakti told is, please take vitamin D supplements. I think I took my vitamin D levels and it was very low because we are always confined to close ambience working atmosphere. So I think vitamin D deficiency is something we should be very, very aware about. Do we have any questions from fellow speakers?
One small question to Shakti.
Yes, sir.
Like like although we know that ophthalmology gives us a chance, like in the evening we can go and do that, all that, but how you manage time? Like what is your real routine? Like you have to balance academics also, you have to balance your surgical part also. So how you are able to manage all these things?
Well, sir,
Sometimes it's very tiring. Sometimes it's very tiring. Like once or twice you do exercise, next day you're very tired. You may not, your body is not giving you that, like where you are not able to do our work properly. What's your take on that?
well, that's an excellent question, sir. Actually, that was the first challenge which I had after I started working in Arvind, because in Arvind, like our work starts somewhere around 7:30, and it can go till 6, sometimes 7. Since I was in Cornea, sometimes it used to go to 7 as well. So like I was not able to find time. What I did was, initially I started going in evening.
Okay.
So and I focused only on my body, like as in I will 1 hour of work. I had one motto: 1 hour of physical workout and 1 hour of mental workout. That should be done by apart from that, nothing else I focus. So I used to go to gym in evening for 1 hour. After that, I will go home, I will read something, I'll eat, and I'll sleep. And the moment I was able to get to that scheduling, after that I moved to early morning because I needed some time for myself as well in evening. So then I started I started waking up early. Earlier I used to wake up around 6 o'clock, then 5. And right now my schedule is that today daily, even today as well, I will wake up somewhere around 4:30. I will brush, I will take my pre-workout or take my breakfast, then I will go for workout. I'll be working out, and then I will start my daily work. So that should be there, that okay, we have to focus this. And I try to be a workaholic person. So I will say that my all energy during work, that was all credit goes to this physical pursuit that I have been following.
Great. Thank you.
Well, thank you, sir.
So I request all the panel members to take Q&A at the end, and we can continue with the sessions. We can take all the presentations first, and then we can continue with the Q&A at the end of the session.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you so much, sir.
So the next topic, in this digital era, it is important to be a tech savvy and to succeed as a postgraduate. So we have Dr. Subhashni with us, former resident of Aravind Hospital, Pondicherry, and the co-author of the book Online Resources in Ophthalmology, to give us the smartest tools to succeed in ophthalm career as a resident. So over to you, Subhashni.
Thank you, sir. Are my slides visible, sir?
Yes, yes.
So a wonderful morning, everyone. After a series of interesting talks, let me all take you through a glimpses of online resources that will potentially help you and to learn and to upgrade your proficiency in ophthalmology. So first, I would like to disclose that I have no financial interest in any of the resources that I have discussed here. Many of the apps available are free, some are paid or have a free and paid version. Ophthalmology residency program has gone through a paradigm shift over the years, with respect to clinical acumen, surgical skills, and exam patterns. So the hunt for the knowledge of ophthalmology has shifted from voluminous library books to an ocean of online resources. As Charles Darwin rightly said, it is not the strongest or the most intelligent who will survive, but those who can best manage change. So in this era of digital e-learning and online consultation, there is a severe need for us to update to the different aspects of this digital arena. Among the plethora of resources, the most commonly sought platforms will be smartphone-based apps, Facebook, websites, Telegram, Insta pages, and YouTube channels. So the most common app that is being used by both medicos and non-medicos will be none other than WhatsApp, which we will use for sharing our clinical photos, videos, and also articles. But it doesn't stop there. There is much more that you can do with your smartphones. We can group the available apps in your smartphones as education apps, basic examination apps, and patient-friendly apps. So starting off with some basic apps, Essential Eye is an excellent teaching app that uses 3D ocular architecture for better understanding of the anatomy. Highly sought Dr. Najib's eye lectures on the anatomy are available as paid versions in both iOS and Android platforms. iGrader app helps you in giving a huge list of gradings and classification systems that are available in ophthalmology. 3D ophthalmology atlas is also available. So starting with some basic websites. So iWiki, a website by AAO, will be your first sought website to get any reliable resource regarding ophthalmology. So Tim Root Virtual Eye Professor gives you basic refraction lessons in the form of very interesting videos. eOphtha and iLearn, both the Indian-made apps, have a huge amount of clinical acumen in the form of simple ray diagrams or line diagrams and the flow charts. It also have got a lot of question banks both for DNB and MS examinations. So coming to clinical discussion apps, so a must try will be King's Crux, which is available both in YouTube and Facebook by our very own chief instructor, Dr. Pranesh, which gives you a wide variety of clinical knowledge through videos, flow charts, and also charts. Recently added ones are the charts. So it is a definitely must try for everyone. More on Eye Care Center, it provides their PG residential lecture classes online in various topics which you can rely on and use it for your classes. CyberSight is a platform where the ophthalmologists all around the world are giving lectures on n number of topics, both clinical and surgical. AAO has an Insta page also, and sure you can follow it. So coming to the most important segment of this talk, the notes taking apps. So these apps have much simplified our lives by changing separate notebooks for each specialty into a single handy iPad or a tablet with a stylus. So among the available apps, the one that I would highly recommend will be OneNote. So this is available for free in both Apple and Android, which is usually connected to a Microsoft account. So in this app, there will be availability of multiple notebooks in which you can create multiple folders for each specialty. And this allows you to write, draw, and to copy or cut and paste from a PDF or a PowerPoint and make a compiled, sophisticated notebook for your own. And you can sync your documents to your account and can retrieve them at any point later. So the other two apps that I have mentioned here are paid apps, but they are available only for iOS users. So regarding literature search, these apps will give you a personalized database for your searched articles, and these are all available free in both the platforms. So SciHub is a wonder website which is literally like a boon to the scientific research, which give easy access to paid articles. So this will be helpful, especially to individual researchers who doesn't have an institutional login to gain such articles. So regarding thesis writing, these Mendeley and Zotero have literally made our bibliography work much easier. Like whenever you download Zotero, make sure you download the Google connector also. Then you have to add your articles from the Zotero library, then give your superscripts. So once you have given your given the articles, so how much ever changes we are making in our manuscripts, the changes will be made automatically through this Zotero app. So there are n number of journal apps that are available, but many of them are paid apps which need success, and some of the apps are available as Insta pages also. So surgery related learning has seen a severe backlog during this pandemic due to the lesser number of patients that are opting for surgeries. So these online resources comes to our rescue. So the most important online resource that has to be given credit is AuroTube, where they have made a brilliant animated series on manual small incision cataract surgery step by step, and also the difficulties faced in each step. So several stimulator apps are available, but they are in primitive stage. And I have mentioned here some of the other sites which you can use to learn the cataract surgery in different skill levels. So I would like to mention some of the specialty resources which I used for my learning. So Iowa Glaucoma Curriculum for glaucoma, and Sinjak Academy for refractive surgeries, and Dr. Stephen Cohen for retina, Connie Coughlin's YouTube channel for squint. It literally made my squint life much easier. And Milind Naik for orbit, and Dr. Andrew Liu for neuro-ophthalmology classes. So many of us are in COVID duties, and some of us are working in peripheral centers. So where these patient testing app, starting from simple Torchlight app, will be a great help to us to recreate an ophthalm OPD in any condition. So several apps are available, like vision testing, color blindness, and contrast sensitivity, Amsler's grid, duochrome test, Watford dot. So all these tests are just a click away. So some of the patient-friendly apps to mention. Simple eye reminder app for the glaucoma patients, and super magnifier app for the low vision patients. And this app, Dignify, is an audio app which actually reads out the material that you have photographed. So one all-rounder app that you can reach out for n number of options, like testing apps, calculators, atlas, even differential diagnosis, clinical cases, everything will be this one Eye Handbook app, which is available for free in both Apple and Android. So do check out our online resources in ophthalmology ebook, which has nicely compiled, which we have nicely compiled about all the apps that are available, and also we have attached the Telegram links for each group for your instant access. So to conclude, being a tech-savvy resident helps you to discover globally and to know the perspective of others and to explore and experiment many things. So make your own style of learning and add glories to our ever-dynamic ophthalmology. Thank you. Special thanks to Dr. Pranay sir and John sir for constant support and guidance. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Subhashini. It's an excellent talk. You have comprehensively covered all the relevant apps and online resources for us. To access that book, Online Resources in Ophthalmology, so please Google the title, ORIO, Online Resources in Ophthalmology, and you'll be going to a website called ISSU, from where you can access this book for free. So we'll take the questions in the end. So now I'm going to call upon the next speaker. We have a serial innovator with us, the only ophthalmologist who has 3 publications on different innovations in our Indian Journal of Ophthalmology. So he is Dr. Prithvi, a retina fellow from Aravindaya Hospital, Coimbatore. So he's going to share with us his secret sauce on how to innovate. So over to you, Prithvi.
Thank you, Pranesh. Also like to thank AIOC for the opportunity. Sharing my screen now. Is it visible?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. I'm going to play a video. The innovative resident. There are three terms that sound similar but are very different from each other: discover, invent, and innovate. While discover means to obtain sight or knowledge of something for the first time, invent means to produce for the first time through the use of imagination or ingenious thinking and experiment. Innovate means to make changes in something established, especially by introducing new methods, ideas, or products. So, what is innovation? It is an idea that has been transformed into practical reality or process to bring new ideas, new methods, or new products to an organization. Let's take an age-old example. If not for innovation, we would be exchanging monetary medium via barter system. In ophthalmology, let's take a few basic examples. Diagnostic innovations in the field of refraction led to the introduction of smartphone refractometers from the plane mirror retinoscope. The evolution of cataract extraction from couching to femtosecond laser due to the innovation in the surgical techniques. Now the question is, why do we need innovation? Innovation is important to us and the entire society as it can be time-saving, provide ease, better quality, affordable, accessible, and improved version altogether. The important questions to the smallest of the idea would be, will it make a positive difference? The main aim of innovation is to solve a real problem or an unmet need for the development and benefit of the society. How can we innovate? It is by a thorough understanding through direct observation of what people want and need in their lives and what they like or dislike about the way particular products are made. All we need is to find a problem statement with an inquisitive mind and work on it further. So now, where to find the problem? We can find problems everywhere around us, but it is important to address the right problem, which can benefit both the doctor and the patient. The problem should address a large audience and should solve real problems. As a resident, when we start fresh, our inquisitive minds can search many such problem statements easily in our daily lives, work which seems to be often ignored by others who have made peace at these common problems around. Don't look for a great idea, look for a good problem. When should you innovate? There is no particular date or time to innovate. One doesn't need any extra time to search a new problem and find a solution to it. It's a part of our daily life, and just by focusing on the real problems, you can innovate the simplest of solutions. So let's stop giving excuses to ourselves and be in constant search or thought of it. Because these problems are right in front of us, we just need to fill the gaps of the jigsaw puzzle. Now for the main question, who can innovate? The answer is anyone and everyone. We are all different in our own way, have our own different creativity or art of doing things. We all have certain unknown qualities which we need to find out. Every person will have a different approach to a certain problem, and that's where all of us can innovate in their own possible way. People who want to innovate need to make it their priority. It should be a skill combined with a will. Few important lessons that I have learned during my journey of innovation. First is to be yourself. Second, stay away from negative people who would always laugh at your ideas. Be surrounded by positive people who are going to lift you higher. Mentoring is important. It could be anybody, like it could be your parents who will support you, your friends who will push you for doing new things, or your teachers who can guide you with their expertise. So always think positive, stay away from negativity because they will always hold you back. Talking about my journey into innovation, I was always passionate about photography. and was that inquisitive kid since childhood who would just want to create something useful from waste products, which would be lying unused. I loved to create something new and show it to my friends when I was in school. Then I met my mentor, my friend, John Sir, during my post-graduation, who saw that I was just focusing on my career and not doing things which I was really passionate about. He suggested me to introduce my photography skills into ophthalmology and create something which would make me enjoy my work even more. This led to my 3 innovations, which were all related to photography and smartphones. Those are flash to treasure red cam, anti-segment photography with intraocular lens, and IOL scope. They were all do-it-yourself, cost-effective, innovative products from just a simple idea. These were all published under the innovation section of Indian Journal of Ophthalmology. IGO has published many such amazing innovation articles and are perfect for any beginner to drive their inspiration from. Simple innovations which gives the best results are the greatest innovation. If the product is good enough, then you should go forward with patency and also get it published in a reputed journal. I would like to say, innovations are the bricks laid by each one of us to lay a foundation that will turn into a beautiful monument in the future. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Prithvi. I think the presentation itself is innovative. You are hearing the trade secrets of innovation right from the horse's mouth. So from Prithvi's presentation, I think you can get 2 messages. One is to be inquisitive, to always be searching for questions. I remember when someone asked A.R. Rahman how you are creating this great music. He said, whenever I start to record my music, I will think I'm a beginner. This is my first recording. So start with a clean slate, be inquisitive. That is why residents are the most potential innovators. You guys can be the most potential innovators. The second message is be passionate about something. You will have something which you're deeply passionate about, and you can see that you can innovate based on your passion. So thanks again, Prithvi. We'll take the questions at the end. So now I call upon the next speaker. The only thing which all the residents are concerned are surgeries. Dr. Danya has a vast experience of performing thousands of surgeries and training hundreds of residents. See, she is a surgeon par excellence. So now Danya ma'am will talk on how to tackle surgeries from residents' perspective. So over to you, ma'am.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Pranesh, for the introduction. I'm Dr. Danya, and my talk is on the scalpel holding resident, how to tackle surgeries. For the next 8 minutes, I'm going to discuss about the right mindset to approach surgeries. The objectives of my talk are to develop a positive attitude, to relieve anxiety, and to boost the confidence of the residents, to provide moral guidance to deal with complications, and to understand the role of hard work in surgical training. This is the dream of every resident who is to undergo cataract surgical training. That is, to sit in front of the microscope and get the microscopic view of patient's eye, to perform skillfully, and to have an ideal postoperative outcome on the next day with a clear cornea and minimal inflammation with an uncorrected vision of 6/6. What we most often forget is that this is what we'll be doing for the rest of our lives, and thus it does not matter whether we have a rough start or a smooth start. Eventually, every one of us is going to be a meticulous surgeon. But the path which we go through is going to be filled with challenges, and our attitude towards these challenges will decide how quickly we bounce back and go forward in the training. For example, when we have a premature entry, it complicates the entire surgery, and so we may be upset. After battling with our emotions, it is essential to come back to reality and gather all the courage and confidence and to lift oneself up. Our trainers and seniors may motivate us, but it lies within oneself the capability to regain faith in oneself. No external force can do this but ourselves. With this kind of attitude in mind, let us enter into the presentation. Going back to the previous slide, looking through the microscope is what we like to do, but looking outside the microscope is equally important. Understand the overall OT layout and the patient flow within the OT. Observe the procedures done by our OT staffs before we start the surgery and after we finish the surgery, like how they get the OT ready in the morning, how they set the tables, and after the surgery is completed, how they shift the patients and counsel the patient, how the OT is cleaned and sterilization procedures are being carried out, and thus we can appreciate our hard-working staffs. Learn to give a good block to keep the patient pain-free, comfortable, and cooperative for the entire duration of the procedure. Observing surgeons' hands from outside the microscope will help us learn how to hold an instrument and manipulate it. For example, how to chase out an air bubble from the anterior chamber using viscoelastic injection through side port. So look around and observe. Every minute spent inside the OT is valuable because there are a lot of activities taking place in various areas of the OT at a given point of time. Giving quality eye care is vital. It is more important than doing most steps of the surgery or more number of surgeries. We should know our limitations and call for help as and when needed. So, quality is more important than quantity. The next aspect is to give a complete patient care. Whenever possible, it is good to see for ourselves the patients on whom we are going to operate on the next day and do a thorough preoperative evaluation. Talk to the patient to earn the patient's trust. On the day of surgery, receive the patient in the OT. Once again, check if the pre-op workup is complete, lock the patient, and then start scrubbing. It is crucial to follow up the patients post-operatively, especially in case of any intraoperative complication. Make sure that the patient is compliant to the treatment given by us. Only if we are familiar with the instruments, drugs, and machines in our armamentarium would we use them wisely. For example, in a mid-dilated pupil, Coughlon's hook or intracameral adrenaline would come handy. So, know the tools. It is a fact that some residents struggle during the initial days of surgical training, whereas some can complete an entire surgery by the end of first week of training. For some residents, it may take an entire day of wet lab practice to take the first bite of suture, leave alone tying the suture. So, do not compare yourself with others. There are no shortcuts to success. Practice suturing in wet lab every day throughout the period of training, at least 50 sutures per day. This helps to develop a good hand-eye coordination. It also gives an idea about depth perception and how to focus on the area of interest. Practice the steps of surgery on goat's eye or cadaveric eye whenever possible. Oscar scoring keeps track of our progress in surgical training. It is an invaluable tool to make us realize where we go wrong during the surgery. Reading books, not just once, but a revision of the entire book after having done a few cases will help us understand the content better. For those residents who operate on a limited number of patients during the residency, recording one's own surgery and reviewing them with as many seniors as possible would help in refining the skills and training and techniques. Dealing with surgical complications is inevitable in our journey. A good surgeon is one who understands what led to the complication. This can be done by discussing about the surgery with the trainer or a senior surgeon who can analyze better and give a solution. This is an opportunity to start reading actively and learn new concepts. Have a notebook to pen down the struggles faced and how to correct them. This way, we will not repeat the same mistake again. We may not be able to perfect all the steps of the surgery in all our cases, so try to perfect one specific step in each case. Watch videos of senior surgeons to know how they manage complications, and watch videos of your own colleagues so that you can learn from their mistakes. Finally, do not give up. Your responsibility is to do the best job that you can at a given point of time and to ensure that your best keeps improving every single day of your career. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. It was an excellent talk. So many valuable inputs ma'am has given us, especially with regards to the mindset of how to approach surgeries. So more than the skill set, the mind matters more. And ma'am has given that message to us. So we'll take the questions in the end. So we'll have the last talk. I'll share my screen. So welcome to the last part of this talk, the eloquent resident. In other words, how to present effectively. We may talk in different scenarios and stages, be it presenting your paper in a conference. One second, I'll just. Is it okay now?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Okay. So the last part of the talk is on how to be an eloquent resident. See, we may talk in different scenarios and stages, be it presenting your paper in a conference, pitching your ideas, presenting a seminar to your seniors or HOD, or even trying to tackle the dreaded Viva. No matter what the scenario is, the ability to put across your thoughts clearly to your audience, the audience can be 1 or 1,000, it doesn't matter. That skill is the most important life skill to learn, let alone medicine. Now let us look at some of the scientific techniques on how to be a strong communicator. I will give you the 4 rules. Rule number 1, always plan on the paper first. I know when you're asked to present a topic by your senior or by your chief, it's tempting to take your laptop, open up the PowerPoint and start adding slides one by one for your presentation. But nothing works better than planning your talk on a blank piece of paper. This is the rough outline of this talk which I'm giving right now, which I made on a single page. Later, I expanded this initial sketch to make a second draft. So this outlining or this mind mapping before preparing your slides or giving any talk gives us more flexibility and clarity. If you are a techie, you can use a mind map software on PC or phone to create an outline. This app is called XMind. It's completely free. Mind mapping is a proven way to learn something, to learn any new ideas. And it is also a great way to prepare a topic and to present the topic as well. And that brings me to rule number 2, always classify the content. You might have noted that I've split this talk into these 4 rules. So always divide the content into numerous subtopics and place them in 3 levels while you prepare and present. So this stepwise approach helps in preparation as well as presentation. Always cut the big cake and feed your audience one small piece at a time. Like how we emulsify the cataractous lens. Always divide and conquer. So I call it as the 3 levels of learning. This methodology I've been following right from my undergraduate days whenever I'm presenting a topic. It's called the ABC levels. It's just inverse of ABC. So we'll start with the C first. In the first level, we present only the fundamental concepts. Please spend more time on this level. Spend the initial minutes teaching the vital points because the attention span of our audience is constantly reducing. How many times we would have been slept or we would have been bored by our seniors talk and start fiddling with our phones. We don't want that to happen to us, right? We don't want to experience that bitter medicine. So before the audience loses us, tell them the vital message. This is my ocular TB lecture script. So this is how I prepared and taught my residents. So I divided the content into multiple subtopics, added my own hand-on illustrations and presented in the same format. Even in each section, classify the information, always divide and conquer. I use the very same document to teach TB to my residents. So I use this app called Notability, which Subhashni mentioned. It's a brilliant app. It comes to around 700 rupees. It's a must if you have an iPad. And I feel every resident should own an iPad. More than I/O, iPad plays a huge role in your learning. This is a great tool to present your ideas. So I rarely use PowerPoint to teach these days because boring slideshows don't help us in teaching science and influencing our students. And that brings me to the next rule. Avoid overuse of PowerPoint. I call it as the PowerPoint poisoning or PowerPoint toxicity. Just look at this slide. The slide apparently talks about PowerPoint overload or simplicity we should maintain, but the slide itself is crowded with text. PowerPoint is a great tool, there is no doubt about it. Even though I'm using Keynote to present this talk, which might sound hypocritical, but the sad truth is that these tools are being abused. PowerPoint slides should never replace the presenters. If the audience can read from the slides all by themselves, even in our absence, then there is no point of presenting something, right? So you can ask the question, how to avoid text-rich slides? Use presenter notes, which is a brilliant addition in both PowerPoint and Keynote, where you can type the text in a box, which will hide while you present on a larger screen, example, on a projector or TV. So this is what you will see. This is what a presenter will see. You will be seeing the slide along with your presenter notes. But the audience will see only the slides on the larger screen. And you will sound really smarter when you don't read the slides directly. But the problem is you will need two screens. You will need a primary computer or a laptop or a desktop, and you will need a secondary monitor. Could be a screen or could be a TV. But since we are all doing Zoom calls these days, there is still an option to share a limited part of the screen. That is only the slide part of the PowerPoint. So click on the share screen, click on advanced and select portion of the screen. What happens is that the presenter will see the entire window along with the slides and the notes, but the audience will see only the selected portion that is within the green box. This is just a live relay of Zoom. Leave aside all the technology. This is my personal advice and from my experience. If you're going to ask me what is the one way to be fluent, clear, persuasive presenter and an effective communicator, please teach. I think we have come like a full circle from Harini's first talk. Teaching is the best way to learn. And not just that, teaching is the best way to be eloquent and fluent. You are never too young to teach. If you are a first-year resident, teach your nurses and help your final years in their examinations. If you're a final year, teach your first year. You know why? By teaching, we become better learners. Whatever ophthalmology, little ophthalmology I remember till date is the concepts I taught my residents and juniors. Because this is a scientific method. You might be knowing this legendary physicist and Nobel laureate. He's Professor Richard Feynman. He will ask his fellows to teach complex physics concepts to kindergarten kids. So these fellows will go there and rack their brains. How am I going to teach physics to a small kid? But interestingly, in that process of racking their brains, trying to find a way, they learned the concepts better. So we strengthen our concepts by explaining to the students in simple terms. This is called as Feynman's technique, which is a proven strategy to learn better. So to summarize, teaching is the shortcut to eloquence. By teaching, you become a better learner of the subject. By learning more and by teaching again and reviewing your reading materials again and again, you have solidified or cemented the concepts when you explain. You will never forget. And when you do that again and again, you will have a clarity in your stream of thoughts. You will know how to put across your thoughts clearly, be it to an examiner, okay, or be it in a conference. By the end of the day, you become a better communicator in putting your ideas across. You become the master in presentation. And that ends with my presentation. Thanks a lot, dear residents, for your attention. So the message is, let us all teach to reach. And this is going to be the playlist. You can type in Talents Teach on YouTube. We'll be adding all the current speakers who spoke before me into this playlist, and you can always watch them whenever you want. They will be giving more insights and their advice and their valuable wisdom in this playlist through these videos. So thank you so much for the patience listening. So now we have ample time. I think we have around 10 minutes, if I'm not wrong. The hall coordinator.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, we have to wrap up by 9:25.
9:25. Okay, perfect. So we got around 10 minutes to discuss on this. So we'll go retrospectively. We'll start from Danya ma'am. Any questions for ma'am from the fellow speakers?
I would like to add something. So
Yes.
Now, as a resident, we'll be concentrating only on how to, learn something new. But we should also remember that we should try to help our colleagues and our juniors. So that is more important. Teaching our juniors is more important. It's not just enough to acquire the skills, but we should also try to educate our juniors.
I'll ask one question, ma'am. This question is for you as well as for Shakti. How to maintain a proper posture? Because in Aravind, we are doing a volume of surgeries, and at one point of time, we compromise our posture. So you have any valuable tips for residents? Because residents does not feel much pain because they're very flexible and young, but as age progresses, you bear the brunt of the bad posture. So any advice by Danya ma'am and Shakti?
There are many, can I go ahead?
Yes, madam, please.
Yeah. There are many videos on YouTube that show how to sit in a slit lamp with our back straight, neck in a comfortable position. But the most important, those technical details we can get from YouTube. But the most important thing is to take adequate breaks, like a break at least every 4 hours. 3 hours is ideal, but at least 4 hours is a must. Whether we operate for the whole day or not, every 3-hour break helps me relax. And if I don't take that break, then I end up in some complication during the surgery. So I would say a break every 4 hours at least. 3 hours is ideal.
Shakti, you want to add to it?
Yeah, yes, Pranesh. Actually, I will tell you about my experience. So first of all, when it actually, like, I started having back pain during my residency time. After that, I had certain jobs where I had to work on operating table for quite a long time. So that time I realized that, okay, back problem is prevalent. And then when I talked about it to my seniors, they were saying that, okay, it causes, it is an occupational hazard, and most of the ophthalmologists leave their work because of that. So from that onwards, I kept focused that, okay, I have to train my back so that it can sustain for longer hours. So the first thing which I did was that I keep reminding myself that I have to sit straight. I have to sit in a neutral position with keeping my neck in a neutral position. Or like even during operating, even while operating, and even while examining a patient. After that, even that is also not enough sometimes, because we have to actually strengthen our back. So that is one more thing that I put emphasis, is that, like, back workout is very important. Like, as in, even if I also have my highs and lows, sometimes I also don't like feeling any workout, not like doing any physical work. I just want to lay down and everything. But I will make sure that weekly, at least once, I'll focus workout which is only focused for back. And that has helped me tremendously. I mean, I have seen result within 1 week. That, okay, now I feel strong. Like, now I can sit straight without even reminding myself. And it overall improves your posture. When you start strengthening all the muscles, your back, your posture improves dramatically. So that was my point. That first, just sit straight and keep reminding yourself. And one more thing is, try to exercise your back once a week, at least.
Perfect. Do you have any resources for the back strengthening exercises? Can we go anywhere and learn about these?
There are many videos on YouTube. They're like, we don't even need to go to gym. There are videos where they will say that back workout without any gym instruments, without any equipments. And the one thing which is very easy is that we can like keep pulling ourselves. We will be finding one bar at least in our home or in the vicinity of our home. There we can go. Like for example, I used to go initially in my kids park, the kids park which is available in my society. There I used to go and I used to just see the bar, and then I used to just hold it and like try to do the back workout. These all things, they are available on YouTube. You can find articles as well. If you keep on searching, you will find that there is one thing, there is some workout which I can do with my current comfort.
Great. So we have Dr. Inderveer Mishra as another excellent surgeon who has joined for the next meeting. Sir wants to say something regarding posture.
Hi, Pranesh. Thank you. Am I
Hi, sir.
audible?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Yeah, so actually, this is a very valid point you have raised. I have had a lot of issues. I was part of Shankara and then Arvind for almost 6 years. Bharat, Karan, all these guys know the struggle I've been through. So, 6 years of non-stop high volume surgeries caused a lot of neck issues. I had disc bulges at 5, 6, C5, C6, C6, C7. I had tingling, numbness, wasting of small muscles of the hand, and then L4, L5 also. And this happened gradually after I stopped working out, stopped operating. When I came to institutes like Agarwal and MM Joshi, that is when I could actually relax. Not performing 100 cases a day. I was down to 12 cases or 20 cases a day. But that is when I started to relax and the back muscles went haywire. I wrote a blog which was read by almost 8,000 people on WordPress with regards to the ergonomics. See, strengthening of the back has to be done at least 3 times a week. You cannot make it once a week. You have to make it 3 times a week. And we ophthalmologists are specifically prone to these kind of degenerative changes, which happens by the age of 45 to 48. Instead of the normal population, when you compare them, that usually happens in 6th or 7th decade. And I actually was contemplating giving up my practice or handing it over to someone else at the age of 37 because of the severe symptoms what I was getting. But physiotherapy works miracles. And there are new ergonomic chairs. There is a saddle chair which has coming in, little expensive. But once you start using this in your day-to-day practice, really helps out a lot. And ergonomics in ophthalmologist or in microbiologist. That is what you need to search on Google. That is where you'll get the entire detail. It's a huge field. There are ergonomic scientists in Bombay which are working specifically with ophthalmologists and microbiologists to help them get over or tide over this problem. I think we need to have kind of a AIS wing for this thing, prevent the future generation from suffering, because we are concentrating more on the numbers rather than our own health. We should be concentrating on both, I believe.
Thank you so much, sir. I think sir is using an ergonomic chair right now, I think.
Yeah, I'm using one because of the problems I faced.
Right. Sir, can you just turn this way to one side so that we want to see that lumbar curvature is there on your chair?
Yeah, so this is something which you can adjust over here.
Right, sir.
So this is the apparatus which you can just adjust up and down based on the area where you want the support to be there.
This is amazing.
So this one cost me around 25,000, but there are ones which are little less expensive, but they serve the same purpose. So ergonomics chair is something which you need. And once you have those symptoms, those tingling, the wasting, the tremors, I even had started losing the hair on my hand, and it was actually scary. The color of the skin had changed. I mean, KP sir was the one who pointed it out to me ki tu sahi nahi baithta hai. Hello, sir. So tu sahi nahi baithta hai. You should sit straight. You should exercise. You should play. Endeavor, you're gaining weight. So that is the time I started realizing that I'm ignoring my body. And this is how I, paid the price. So it's been 1 year. I've been in rehabilitation. I'm still operating, but I've started working out with weights, and this is under proper guidance. I mean, this should start earlier in your residency rather than, once you become a consultant.
Pranesh, when Indevar was with us, he was looking more into the discs of the patient in the eye rather than his own disc. I think this is where we miss it.
Right, sir. So thank you so much, sir. And thank you, sir, Krishna Prasad, sir, for joining us, and Qureshi, sir, for joining us.
And Pranesh,
Thank you, sir, for joining, sir.
Dr. Pranesh, hello.
Yes, sir.
One small thing.
Yeah.
Please, after every patient, if you start getting up, and after every surgery, if you start getting up, I think that is probably the beginning thing. Most of us, we are sitting all the time. I think you get up and whatever you can explain to the patient, talk to the patient, do it in the standing posture. You want to examine the slit lamp, I do agree. But why should you talk to the patient sitting? After you finish your examination, stand up. Patient thinks that is respect, but you are basically respecting your back.
Great, sir. Thank you so much. That is just a very valid point, a very simple message for residents. Stand up after you see a patient. Dr. Shakti wants to add something to it.
Yeah, Pranesh. Actually, for this posture straightening and all, there are two devices. This is just a trivia that all my tech friends, they are using it actually, and they are saying that it has helped them it has helped them tremendously. I'll just show you two images. Okay.
Yeah.
Should I share my screen?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So, can you see this photo that I'm showing?
We could not see the photo.
Just 1 minute.
Yeah.
Screen. I'll just okay. Now.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
So these are the posture correctors. There is a smaller version for it as well. We just, if we Google it, we can find this, and there are other variants as well. And there is one more, and this is one advanced device. Can you see this one? The another one?
No, we could not.
Just 1 minute.
Yeah.
Hold on. Yeah. Can you see this?
Yes. Yes.
So this is the this is one more. Actually, and this has this will join to your phone, and you can see that how many times you are actually slouching, how many times your posture is not correct. So that way you can get the statistics that okay, this much time I am having very bad posture. That's it.
What is the name of this device?
Sir, even I have no idea. They saying these images, and they were telling that these are very good devices, but if you Google posture corrector, both of them will come.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is called as Stracker. 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 It is available on Amazon. It comes to around 5,000
Both are
rupees.
available.
Thank you. Thanks, Pranesh.
Thank you to all our
Yes. So for the want of time, we stop it here. Thank you so much, Isha, for coordinating the session, and thanks a lot, speakers, for joining us. Residents and medical officers and other fellows who have joined us in this early morning, 8 o'clock Sunday. I know it's very difficult. And thanks again, Indraveer Mishra sir, Krishna Prasad sir, Qureshi sir for joining us, Karan sir for joining us. Thanks a lot. Thank you so much. Cheers. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thanks to you, Dr. Pranesh.
Thanks to all seniors for joining us. Thank you, Lord.
Thank you
Have a
all.
great day.